Hello, we're live. Hello, everyone. We're going to wait 1 minute for everyone to jump on. And while we do that, I'll give you a quick reminder. I'm the medical matchmaker. I help doctors find the ideal job, the jobs of our dreams, where we get to really enjoy practicing medicine. So if you're looking, please contact me. There's no cost to you. You have nothing to lose. I'd love to help you not just find a job, but really navigate the whole interview, negotiations, everything. So I hope some people have jumped on by now. I have the amazing Dr. Palmer with me, pediatrician extraordinaire. So, Dr. Palmer, can you tell us a little bit about you and your story?
Yes. Well, thanks for having me on the show. I'm really excited to be here. I love what you do. I wish that I had somebody like you when I was out of residency looking for my first job or second job or third job. As you mentioned, I'm a general pediatrician. I live here in Portland, Oregon, where I get to see kids from newborn all the way to, actually, I see my patients till 21. I just opened my new practice called Pure Joy Pediatrics in November of 2022 and am absolutely loving every single moment that I spend here. And I feel like my patients and parents are as well, which was the whole point of opening my own practice. But to kind of back up a little bit, for many, many years, I worked for large hospital groups. I think a lot of us coming out of residency do. My first job out of residency, I worked with an emergency room group and actually floated between lots of different hospitals. So I had that experience. And after that, I worked for another large children's hospital, which was actually a better experience. And I was with them for about 8 years working as an urgent care doctor, and then moved out here to Portland and worked for another large hospital system for about 2 years as their urgent care doctor before finally joining a small group practice. I was with them for 6 years, and now I felt like I was ready to be out on my own and launched my new practice in November, and it has been a lot of fun. So thanks for having me on this show. I am, I'm really excited to be here and just kind of share what I know.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you here. It's so awesome. And I love that you've kind of seen so many different things. So let's go through them a little bit. I'm curious to know, from your standpoint, you worked for some bigger systems. What was it like working for those systems, the good and the bad?
Well, I don't think I loved floating between hospitals too much. And actually, in the circumstances where I was at, I just actually was talking to a family earlier this morning about it. There literally were billboards that would say how long of a wait it was in the emergency room. And there was a lot of pressure on the doctors in the emergency room. So I'm general peds, but I was working in a pediatric emergency room to see patients from start to finish. Well, actually, from the moment they hit the door, you had 30 minutes to assess the patient. It didn't matter if they had a cold, an ear infection, a laceration. It didn't matter if you were clearing a C-spine or it was like a major, a motor vehicle accident that came in on a backboard. You had 30 minutes. And so it really didn't feel fair to the patients or to the doctors. For that matter. And, we worked day shifts and swing shifts and night shifts. And so there was like the sleep piece of it where, shift work is like that, right? So like, if you're working as a hospitalist or an emergency room doctor and you're up all night, you might do 2 of those in a row and then be off for 2 days and then on days, for 3 days in a row. So that part was also really, really tough. And there really wasn't, the contract that I had a little bit of wiggle room in it, but not a whole lot. It was one of the first contracts I was handed that said, there is no negotiating this contract. And, I was fresh out of residency. I was like, oh, okay, well, how about I thought it was pretty clever. I was like, well, how about a differential for the travel? How about that? How about I get paid a differential, a little more for traveling outside the city if it's like more than an hour? I thought that was like great, and so I got that. The docs don't really talk much about like how much they make or what their contracts contained. But another colleague of mine at the time, he kind of started with the same group at the same time. He didn't have the travel differential. And I was like, I got the travel differential. I thought that was, that was like my one point of negotiating. And it turns out I probably should have asked for more. So that was that experience. And then I was really excited to work for the children's hospital that I was with after that, working in the urgent care. And honestly, like, it was unusual because I noticed that a lot of the attendings that worked at this hospital had been there for a long time, and a lot of the staff had been there for a long time. This is a really good sign. this was actually a fantastic hospital system to work for. We were always short staffed in the urgent care, which I think is really kind of common anywhere you work as a doctor these days. You're going to be short staffed. I didn't know better. I just was like, why is this urgent care always so short staffed? So that actually was a really great experience. I left them after 6 or 7 years because I wanted to move out west. And took a it was basically a lateral move. I took the same, but let me back up. That really wonderful children's hospital, again, like non-negotiable contract. And I, again, thought I came out on top because like my colleagues were like, okay, it's a non-negotiable contract, but at least you can like negotiate for it being a 5-year contract instead of a 3-year contract. And so that's what I did. Like you could, yeah. And I came out thinking I came out on top. I was like, this is great. But like, there was no negotiating what you got paid per hour. And I was like, gosh, I thought doctors made more than this, but I had no frame of reference. Right. The benefits were great and it was urgent care. So it was flexible. And I was like, oh, this is great. And then I moved out west and again was faced with a contract that was non-negotiable. Like it really, the only thing that I could maybe like play around with was how many shifts I worked in a month. So instead of 18, I worked 16. And again, I came out thinking I'm on top. I negotiated my contract. So, and I worked with them for about 2 years in urgent care and saw a lot of patients. And I think, that was like the second time I was actually burnt out because I saw so many patients and I was asking the hospital for some support. And I said, could I have a scribe? And they said, well, you'd have to pay for that yourself. Or you just stay and finish the charting because you should be finishing the charting. And I was like, but you don't understand. Our patient volume is picking up. I can't see urgent care patients and chart in the 15 minutes that I have. Well, you're just going to have to figure that out. And so there wasn't, that's just how they do it. And so that, that got old really fast and I didn't feel like I had support from the hospital system and they just don't have. Larger hospital systems just move very slowly. Like you can voice your concern, you can give feedback and your supervisor will listen, but you really never have the feeling that this little voice carries to the people on top. At the same time, they would come to me and they'd say, oh my goodness, we get thank you notes from your patients. Like they send notes to the top brass saying how good you are. You're fantastic. And I'm like, I'd like that reflected in my paycheck. I'd like that reflected in some support.
As a scribe.
Yeah. So, so that was my experience working for that company. And so then I stepped out, and joined a small group practice thinking it would be vastly different. And it really.
Well, let's pause there.
Yes.
I wanted to pause at this other hospital. So you left. How long did it take you from the time you were like, I should probably leave to actually decide to leave?
At least 3 to 6 months.
Oh, that's pretty quick. Good for you.
Yeah.
How long do you think you were burned out before?
Well,
before that?
I think it was before we really were paying a whole lot of attention to burnout or, when people brought up physician wellness, I was like, what is physician wellness? I'm well, this is great. And that's just like, I don't know. It's like very touchy feely, right? It's sort of like, I think being in touch with our own wellness as physicians is really hard. And it's the strangest dynamic because here we are encouraging our patients to be well. I can't tell you how many times I've canceled patients to get more sleep, knowing very well that I'm only getting like 5 hours of sleep because I stay up late charting. And I would come out of this position of like, I'm counseling you to do this because I can't do it for myself, which is really, really sad.
That's very sad.
Yeah. And I think when I was experiencing burnout, I didn't realize that that's what it was. What I did notice was that the more patients I saw, the less I cared. And I thought, I can't work this many shifts because it's just seeing too many patients. I'm very empathetic. I'm very compassionate. I love those patient care encounters. And when I felt like I was tuning out, I realized it was because I was working too many shifts and seeing too many patients per shift. And so then I wouldn't pick up any extras. But there really wasn't anything I could do to get out of the number of shifts I had to work in a month. But I didn't recognize that was burnout. I just thought that it was just me. And so, so I started looking, part of it was like family things, like my son was going to start school and I didn't want to work nights and weekends anymore. And I think that was really kind of the excuse I used to move out of the urgent care position that I was in, to a day position, which I thought, gosh, it's primary care. Like, how bad could it be? You don't see that many patients like I do in urgent care. And then, come to find out that primary care is a whole other different, wonderful, wonderful world of continuity and follow-ups. And I, that's its own beautiful dynamic. But if you see too many patients, even that can be too much, right?
Yeah. I mean, in any setting, I totally agree with you. I think once you see that many patients or you're burned out or, something has gone awry, whether it's, whatever, it almost feels like I don't like medicine when you don't realize, it's not that I don't like medicine. I just don't like the way I'm being made to practice medicine,
Right. Yeah. I think also what happened for me as well is that wherever I worked, it seemed like the people around me were content, that they'd somehow figured out how to eke out an existence where they practiced medicine and were able to do the things they like to do. And we would just like trade shifts. And I just wondered, like, how are they able to make this work? And it just doesn't seem like I'm able to. And I really feel like I was looking for I thought that it was looking for the right position, that I just hadn't found the right position yet that really kind of struck, all the things I needed, which was adequate pay, adequate sleep, not too many patients, not staying up late charting. And I thought that the small group practice was it because, gosh, like you maybe see like 60% of the patients I saw in urgent care. And because you're their continuity physician, that you get to know them is what I was told. And so your visits are a lot faster. But what nobody told me was how much time we would spend charting. And so I would work a full day and we rounded on newborns in the morning, worked a full clinic day, and then literally would have about 2 hours of charting in the evening. And, was made to understand that, again, like that's my responsibility. If you would just chart during the day, then you wouldn't have to chart at night. But most of the physicians I talked to chart at night. And it really put a lot of pressure on my family time because I just, my little son, like I just had him on. I was like a drill sergeant. I was like, okay, we get home, you eat, you bathe, you go to bed. I need you in bed so I can chart. And that was our existence for a long time. But yeah, so there's another way though.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be that way. And I think just hearing someone else's story is so important. I've learned not everyone's ready to talk about their, the ugly parts of themselves. So
Right.
I like to do this thing where I'll tell people things about myself that are maybe not so pretty, almost when I feel like, you know what I'm saying, kind of like, and often the response that I get is, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you said that because I thought I was the only person that felt that way. I'm like, no, like, whether it's to do with medicine or parenting, whatever, like, I love my kids, but I don't want to play with them all day. I
Right.
love my kids. And I think, and I actually learned this little, I don't know what you call it, technique, whatever, from another mom who said, she said, and I remember it clear as day because it was such a like, moment for me. She said, I don't like to play with my kids for more than 10 minutes a day. And I was like, what? And then I thought about it. Oh, actually, yeah. Like, and so now I kind of pass on that knowledge too. But I think, telling your story is so important. And someone watching actually says, they felt the same thing. And so, I'm excited to kind of dig a little bit deeper and go a little bit more into it and see how you've found your way to where you are now, because you're loving it. Like,
I'm loving it.
Yeah, living the dream, not without challenges, but
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so private practice came. You were still charting all hours of the night. How did that turn into this?
Oh, Where do I start with that? Yeah, I thought that joining this small group practice was it. I was going to I was going to retire doing that with that particular group. And at some point, I was looking at, I think really like the pandemic, maybe for a lot of people was like a reset button or a pivoting point. I wouldn't say it was so much a pivoting point for me, but there were days there where we had 3 patients in the office and I was like, this isn't enough to keep the lights on. Like, let's just be real, right? Like we have to, doctors don't like to talk about money and like that, we're making money off of patients or this or that. And, but really like anybody else, like if you go to your hairdresser, you get your hair done, you pay them right there on the spot, right? Doctors, same thing. Like we have huge overhead. And that actually would be one of the things that I've learned as an entrepreneur and in private practice is like our overhead is through the roof. It's almost like you say you're going to get married and the same venue, like if you were having like a birthday party, now costs $2,500 more. I feel like starting a practice is the same thing in medicine. Like, oh, you're a doctor? Well, let's jack up the prices for you, kind of a thing. But anyway, I digress. So during the pandemic, I started listening to podcasts because I had a lot of extra time because I wasn't seeing patients because nobody was coming in. And I started listening to podcasts about how to run businesses and about finances and things like that. And that just seemed, one thing led to another. And I found myself like in a physician entrepreneur group. And as we came out of the pandemic, I really thought that physician entrepreneur group was going to help me with the business that I was currently in. And so I was learning some business skills and how to think about marketing and, managing, the workflow and getting my charting done and, like what those, pieces of the revenue cycle management and all of that. And I thought it was going to help me where I was at. And what actually happened was it made it impossible for me to fit in that box anymore. I grew the way I thought about being a physician and what I wanted to achieve as a general pediatrician. It changed over time. And I found that as I was trying to employ these principles that I was learning in the practice I was in, like they're just like their idea of running the practice and my idea of running the practice were just like polar opposites. And I was like, we couldn't coexist anymore. And so it was funny because I'm learning all these things and, I found myself thinking this is like unsustainable. And then found myself having to make a decision about where am I going to take this? Because I'm mid-career. I had a full patient practice. I wasn't moving out of town, but where was I going to take my patients if they wanted to follow me? So, I had lots of choices. And I think, when I came out of residency, maybe I didn't feel that way. But now, that I've had a little bit of experience, and even if you're coming out of residency, like you should just know you have lots of choices. And if you think you only have one,
this way. Listen to her. So many choices.
No, listen to her.
Wait.
Talk to Laura. There she is. We have lots of choices. I think maybe, I don't know if it's like in medical school or residency, like you're matching and you're going to match at one spot and you really don't feel like you have a choice. And it almost feels like the military, like you go where you're told, you go where you get in. And I think we come out of residency, maybe thinking the same thing, like we don't have lots of choices and that we're just lucky that somebody wants to give us a job. We're just lucky we have a contract to review, but not negotiate. And it just isn't true. And so I now knew this coming out of this small group practice that I had lots of choices and I explored them all and I explored them really quickly. I looked at joining another private practice. They offered me a contract that was not, it was like nearly demeaning. And I walked away from it. There was another one where we were going to share an office space and then somebody else got involved and wanted me to pay more money. And I was like, yeah, I'm not signing another contract. Looked at, really, to be honest, like going out of state. And then I realized that I didn't want to do that either because my patients were calling me, and I love them, and we have roots here. My son didn't want to go anywhere. And I was like, you know what? Wait a second. I remembered when I was a pre-med, I thought that I would be in solo practice and hang up a shingle and start seeing patients. Not in Portland, Oregon. I was going to be on the big island of Hawaii, but it's okay. Lots of Hawaiians live here in Oregon. And some of them actually come to see me here. And I was like, oh, what about that idea? And wait a second, you've learned all of these things about marketing and like starting a business, and it all just kind of came together. And I had been toying with the idea even before leaving my small group practice of starting my own practice. And I even had a name, Pure Joy Pediatrics, because that encapsulated the way I feel about the pediatric encounters and what I wanted my patients and their families to feel when they came to see me. And in addition, I wanted the staff that worked for me to feel that way, because I just was so tired of like the staff turnover. And I mean, I in the previous practice, I had patients walk out saying, it's just taking, walking out of the waiting room, like not even being roomed. And they said, this is just ridiculous. And so I really got tired of all of that. And so, starting my own practice was really a way to try to problem solve so that that doesn't happen again. And so that I can practice as a general pediatrician, taking care of pediatric patients the way I think they should be cared for. And oh, by the way, the reward is, the patient encounter, and also like seeing your ideas come to fruition. There's nothing like it. It's been an absolutely amazing experience.
So, well, before we go on, anyone watching, please give some Dr. Palmer some love and type in #PureJoy in the comments. And someone says, Pure Joy is a super duper cool name. Good for you. I love it too. It's awesome.
I love it too.
Actually, we go together. I'm Happy Day Health and you're Pure Joy Pediatrics.
Pure Joy.
I think
I think
we think similarly.
It's the medical. It's the best like match, right? The medical matchmaker
cool.
and Happy Day.
So tell me how you feel. Like, can you contrast the feelings that you had, like deep down, and even more kind of surface feelings of from before, when you were maybe in either the hospital employed practice or feeling stifled in this private practice that wasn't a good fit for you, and then how you feel now in your own practice where you've really created the environment where you want to be working?
Oh gosh. Oh my goodness. Yeah. I think you're burnt out when it's hard to go to work. And I, throughout residency, I never felt that way. Like I loved going to work and seeing patients, and I just never wanted to leave. And, you have to draw boundaries and say, okay, it's time to go home. But when I started to get burned out at the last position I had, I really didn't want to go to work. And really like the joy that I felt, the only joy that I felt was when I was in the exam rooms with my patients. And I would look at them and, we're all wearing masks, and I would look at them thinking, you have no idea that this is the most enjoyment I'm getting out of the day is being here with you. And you think that you're bringing to the encounter your questions and that I'm giving something to you, but you have no idea how much you're giving back to me. So that was the last position that I was in. And when I walked out, I was so excited. I was like, this is awesome. And it was like summertime. And so the weather here is like absolutely glorious. And I was sad to not be able to say goodbye to my patients. I was sad that I wasn't going to see them for a while, and I didn't know what the next step was exactly. But I was really excited just to be out. I felt like I had been let out of prison. I've been in prison before, but I would surmise that it's something like this. Just this like huge weight lifted off my shoulders. And then I had somebody say to me, oh, well, aren't you stressed out building this practice? And I was like, actually, no, like I'm not getting paid to do this. I'm still like ramping up to try to like pay myself. But it doesn't stress me out. It's just, I'm a startup. I've only been I've only had my practice open for 3 months. And so like it slowly builds. And the revenue that finally you get to take home slowly builds. But it hasn't been stressful. It's been absolutely joyful. I have a really great team. I'm still part of this business group, EBS, EntreMD. Has been extremely helpful. I am able to be in community with other people that are physician entrepreneurs as well. And so it hasn't been hard. And now when I come to work, like I'm as joyful as my patients are when they come in. I have like a big smile on my face. I love coming to work. Like, some afternoons I'm not super busy with patient care, but I love being here. And it feels like this huge weight was lifted off my shoulders. I have other responsibilities as a physician entrepreneur, but I'm doing this saying, gosh, why didn't I do this sooner?
There's so much fear that I see in physicians. Often I obviously I'm talking with doctors who are kind of in that transition phase of their career. And when I often ask doctors, have you thought about starting your own practice? Or, there's practices that are not just offering partnership, but they're actually offering like, hey, let me teach you the business side. And then I will give you the practice when I retire in 5 to 10 years, like
Right.
crazy cool stuff. And these are old practices similarly to what you described, where they just, they created the place that they want to be.
Mhm.
But there's so much fear of not having that certainty. I think that, when you talked about not having the choice of going where, not having choices when you match to med school and residency and all of that, and we kind of take that into our lives in our careers. When faced with that choice, I see probably the biggest barrier in doctors choosing what may be the best choice for them is that fear of, well, I need to start with a certain salary, or what if I don't build my patient panel, or if I'm getting a percentage of revenue rather than a guaranteed base.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure. Like, if I show them like this is the potential if you see X number of patients a day, which is far higher than the salary in other situations, there's that uncertainty and that fear of not knowing exactly what's going to happen. Can you speak to that a little bit? Because you start your own practice. That's pretty uncertain.
It's so fun. I had I have like a local branch of the AAP reached out to me like, hey, can we interview you? Because there's so few startups. And it was funny because as I was going through this, I was like, gosh, I felt like starting a practice was like a big deal for me. But I think it turns out it's kind of a big deal to start a medical practice, especially right now where like doctors are leaving medicine. And doctors are leaving medicine, and I'm actually going to switch over. I have my little. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. So right now doctors are leaving medicine, and we're heading into a recession. And I just started my own private practice, and I think I'm doing it because I have the confidence that the service that I bring to the patients that need me is very much needed. And I think maybe I had a little bit of an advantage because I already had some patients. But to be honest, like I'm in a new area of town, and so my demographics have changed, and so I still, like, even though I'm mid-career and had a huge patient population, I am still going through what everybody goes through to build a business. Like, I am pounding the pavement. I am out at other doctors' practices. I am meeting everybody that I possibly can to promote this practice. And I think, how can I say this? There are so many things to be afraid of. When we start out trying to get into medical school, like we're afraid that we're not going to get in, but you know what your end goal is. You want to become a doctor because somewhere there in that process, you heard the calling. Like you were like, I'm called to this profession. I am called to help. And in this particular context, as a physician. And so you just keep plowing through. You're like, I recognize I'm afraid I might not get into medical school. I'm afraid I might fail the MCAT. And then, on to residency, like, I'm afraid I'm not going to get into the residency that I want. And then you do that. And then you're like, your first day as an intern, you're like, I'm really afraid of making decisions. I'm afraid of killing somebody, right? I'm afraid of not getting the right diagnosis. And then you're done with residency and you're afraid of being an attending. I felt like that first year out of residency was so hard because I was the one ultimately making decisions. And yeah, I mean, there's people you can confer with, but then you're like afraid that they're going to think you're dumb and that you don't know what you're doing, that you have no experience, and that your patients are going to like, I think the whole journey is wrought with fears. But what do? We know what our end goal is, and we just keep pushing through, and we're like, I have confidence that I can get through medical school. I have confidence I can get through residency, and then you do it. And so as an entrepreneur, I think there's a lot of things that I could be afraid of, but I wasn't really afraid of failing. I was afraid of succeeding. I was afraid of like, I was afraid of not being able to keep up my goals and my intentions for this practice. And so I think that's probably like the thing that kind of rules the roost more than, being afraid that nobody's going to come. And so I think to be a successful entrepreneur, I've had to like look at fear, realize, okay, that is kind of scary. Like signing a contract is kind of scary. Signing a contract for leasing a space, finding a space, all of these things, like waiting to get contracts with insurance companies and things like that. It's all kind of scary, but you just recognize that ultimately what is your goal? And that is for me to have, a successful practice that delivers a service that I think is much needed in the way that I feel that it should be done. And so we just keep pushing. Like fear just cannot be the speed bump that you get stuck on. You just have to kind of push yourself over it and realize that there's always things to be afraid of. And it's funny, like the more you practice it, the better at it you get, but there still will be things that come up that you are afraid of, right? Like some people are afraid of not making payroll, right? I think you just learn to push past it.
Yeah.
And find out who your resources are. Like being part of a community of physicians that are building practices has been like the best investment that I possibly could have done. I'm like so fortunate to have found a good group.
Yeah. So for people who are either maybe currently looking for a job or thinking, maybe this is a multi-part question, either looking for a job now or thinking maybe it's time to start looking for a job because, well, oh gosh, I am burned out. Oh, I do wake up with a feeling of dread or whatever.
Right.
What advice do you have to give to people who are either looking, thinking about looking, anything like that?
I think if you've been burnt out once, it's probably easier to recognize when it happens to you the first time. I would say the warning signals are apathy, like when you really don't care about what you're doing, when you feel that compassion is driven out of your patient encounters, because you're so tired or seeing so many patients and you just can't keep it straight. And you know what? And you don't really care and you just can't wait till the end of your shift. Like that's probably a sign that you are burning out. And recognize it quickly, because anytime you are looking for a job as a physician, it may take several months to find the right position or the one that you think is the right position. And then remember that you need to get credentialed with hospital systems. You need to get credentialed with contracts for insurance companies if you're going to be like an insurance-based practice. So, like start looking early, like at least if you can give yourself 6 months, that's even better. I think that when I took the job out here in Portland, it took me a year. It took me a year to find the right position. And then when I found the right position, I knew that they were going to call me and I knew I was going to have the job. And so, yeah, I would say give yourself like a good 6 months and also just be very confident. I spoke to another physician. She's like, I'm worried that I won't be able to like keep the patients in the practice once I transition and I'm running this practice. And I was like, okay, so here's the thing. There's a doctor shortage and there's lots of patients. So I would never be worried about not having enough patients. That's not a worry I ever have. So yeah, give yourself enough time and recognize the signs early, so that you're not really kind of floundering and not able to take care of yourself or not able to take care of your family. I would act early. I wouldn't stick it out because it probably isn't going to get better if it hasn't already.
Yeah, just to emphasize what you said about giving it time is, obviously, if you find something quickly, then wonderful. But really, what you said is give yourself time and find the right practice because you don't want to just jump from one big evil corporation to another big evil corporation. Maybe find a
No.
big nice corporation or, like, you know, maybe a private practice that will really more closely align with what your values are.
Right.
So, and of course do your due diligence as
Right.
well. But yeah, I really, I just want to emphasize those two things that you said, like time, don't rush into something and make sure it's the right practice, or at least
Yeah.
what you think is the right practice.
Yeah. And well, I was going to say, like, how do you know it's the right practice? And that's why, like, I wish that I'd had you, Laura, when I was like looking for a practice or when I was looking for my first job, because you have the experience and like the breadth of knowledge, like seeing lots of different practices. Because you're doing the legwork, you're finding the ideal practice where like physicians could thrive and actually love what they do and spend time with their family and like be well rested and get their charting done. And like you're doing the heavy lifting, you're doing the hard part, which is like searching for the right position. And so I kind of look at you as like a coach, right? Like coaches help athletes get better at a sport that they're already kind of good at. And a coach kind of helps accelerate the process to get you to where you want to go. I mean, I think physicians are coaches. Like we help, coach people to wellness and like quit smoking and like, coach them through having a newborn at home. And so why not take advantage of somebody who already has that kind of access? You know, because honestly, like as you're burning out, like your head is like ready to explode. Like you might be feeling overwhelmed, you might be experiencing anxiety, you may not be sleeping. And it's like on top of the job that's burning you out, do you really have the time to go looking for the ideal position? I think anywhere you can get help, in a resource like what Laura has to offer, it's hard to find and she's doing it. So yeah.
Thank you. And please contact me, happydayhealth.co.
Yes.
My jobs are awesome.
Yes, they are.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I really hope that at least one person watches this and, maybe is able to smash through their fears because
Yeah.
of it and, know that it's okay to change course or, what was right maybe isn't right. And maybe it's time to either change where change something about where you are or just change the place. That's
Yes.
okay. And you're a badass. And I just want to say, Dr. Palmer is an ordinary human being who is a badass. Like, there's nothing, I mean, you're special, but there's nothing like different about her that makes Dr. Palmer able to do what she does. She's a physician. Dr. Palmer, you're smart, you're kind, you care about the patients. And if you can start a business, which is a private practice, and if I can start a business, like any of us that are physicians can do that. So, you're totally awesome. And I think you're like your patients are lucky to have you. You're so sweet.
Oh,
Anyone who ever
oh,
meets Dr. Palmer in real life just it's like dripping sugar, just
thank
sweet as
you.
honey.
Thank you. If I could just add real quick, like I think maybe one way to think about it, maybe coach is not doesn't work for everybody, but in medicine we have a mentor. Like everybody has mentors that kind of help you guide you through the process. And like I would love to be somebody's mentor to figure out like how to start a private practice. And I know you, Laura, are an amazing mentor with what you do and like finding the right fit for a physician and for a practice. And so, I mean, I'm on social media, you're on social media. I'm sure like, if anybody has questions and just needs a mentor, like just needs to like have a burning question answered, like we're here. I think just helping physicians find what works best to keep physicians in medicine and keep them happy is like that's my priority. I'm hoping that other pediatricians will want to join me in this practice.
Where can anyone find you if they have any burning questions for you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, Karen Palmer MD. Same for Facebook and social media. And then if you want to look and see what we're doing at our practice, purejoypediatrics.com is where you'll find pictures of me and explanations of what we do here at our practice. But yeah, we're pretty easy to find.
Thank you so much for joining us. And so Dr. Palmer is just a wealth of knowledge and would be happy to answer any questions. So if you have questions, please do reach out. And of course, if you're looking for a job, let me know. I would love to help you, and I will gladly mentor you through the whole process of interviews and negotiation and all of that. Because why find a job if you don't know what you're doing once you find it? So
Take advantage of that offer, guys.
Seriously, nothing to lose. All right. Well, thank you so much for watching. And if you catch the replay, type #PureJoy.
Thank you.